In the harsh, unforgiving lands of Scandinavia, a legendary warrior was born, forged in the fire of battle and driven by a thirst for glory. The year was 865 AD, and the Vikings tribe was on the brink of collapse. The harsh winter had taken its toll on their crops, and the once thriving village was now on the verge of starvation. It was in this desperate landscape that Ivar the Boneless, a fearless Viking warrior, was born. His fate was intertwined with the gods, and his destiny was clear: to bring glory to his tribe and strike fear into the hearts of their enemies. As Ivar grew in strength and prowess, he became increasingly restless. The Vikings tribe had always been a seafaring people, raiding and plundering their way across the known world. But now, with their very survival at stake, Ivar knew that they needed something more. He needed a prize, a treasure that would secure their future and cement his own legacy. One night, around the fire, Ivar's father, Ragnar Lothbrok, told tales of the rich and prosperous kingdoms of England. The English, with their fat monasteries and wealthy towns, were like lambs waiting to be devoured. Ivar's eyes gleamed with excitement as he listened to his father's stories. He knew that this was the opportunity they had been waiting for. But the journey would not be easy. The English were not a people to be trifled with, and their kingdom was heavily fortified. Ivar would need to gather a crew of the bravest warriors and plan his attack carefully if he was to succeed. As the winter slowly receded, Ivar set about gathering his crew. He traveled to the nearby villages. The Vikings' village came alive. The sound of hammering on metal echoed through the fjords, and the smell of freshly cut wood filled the air. Ivar's men were preparing for battle, and the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Will Ivar and his men be able to overcome the obstacles and reach the English kingdom? Will they be able to claim their prize, or will they fall victim to the treacherous waters and fierce English warriors? As the Viking ships set sail for England, the wind was in their favor, and the omens were good. But Ivar knew that the gods were not always kind, and that the journey would be fraught with danger. What secrets lie hidden in the English kingdom, waiting to be uncovered by Ivar and his men? The fate of the Vikings' tribe hung in the balance, and the outcome was far from certain. But one thing was clear: Ivar the Boneless would not rest until he had achieved his goal, no matter the cost. The legend of Ivar the Boneless is about to begin. Where are you watching from? The Vikings' ships sliced through the choppy waters of the North Sea, their sails billowing in the wind as they approached the English coast. Ivar the Boneless stood at the prow of the lead ship, his eyes fixed on the horizon as he scanned the coastline for any sign of danger. The wind whipped through his hair, and the spray of the sea stung his face, but he stood firm, his gaze unwavering. As they approached the shore, Ivar's men prepared for battle, their armor clanking as they readied their weapons. The English kingdom of East Anglia was known for its rich monasteries and churches, and Ivar's men were eager to claim their share of the spoils. But as they dropped anchor and launched their longboats, a sense of unease settled over Ivar. Something didn't feel right. The English coastline was eerily quiet, the only sound the lapping of the waves against the shore. Ivar's instincts screamed at him to be cautious, but he knew that he couldn't turn back now. They had come too far, and the prize was too great. As they landed on the shore, Ivar's men formed a shield wall, their shields overlapping as they advanced towards the nearby village. The village was deserted, but Ivar's men knew that the English army couldn't be far behind. Suddenly, a shout went up from the rear of the column. "Enemy approaching!" Ivar turned to see a cloud of dust rising on the horizon, the English army charging towards them with lances couched. The Vikings' hearts pounded in their chests as they readied themselves for battle. The English army was huge, their armor glinting in the sunlight as they charged towards the Viking lines. Ivar's men stood firm, their shields locked and their swords raised. The battle was about to begin, and the outcome was far from certain. Will the Vikings be able to hold their ground against the English army, or will they be overwhelmed by sheer numbers? The English army crashed into the Viking lines, their lances shattering against the shields. Ivar's men fought with all their might, their swords rising and falling in deadly arcs. The battle raged on, the outcome hanging precariously in the balance. As the fight intensified, Ivar found himself face to face with the English commander, a giant of a man with a sword as long as Ivar's arm. The two warriors clashed, their swords ringing out as they fought for dominance. But just as it seemed that the Vikings were gaining the upper hand, a new threat emerged. A group of English archers appeared on the flank, their bows drawn and ready to fire. Ivar's men were caught in a vice, trapped between the English army and the archers. The Vikings' shield wall was starting to waver, and Ivar knew that they couldn't hold out for much longer. Can Ivar and his men find a way to break through the English lines and claim their prize, or will they be cut down where they stand? The battle was reaching its climax, and the fate of the Vikings hung in the balance. Ivar's men fought with all their might, but the English army seemed endless. Would they be able to overcome the odds and emerge victorious, or would they succumb to the English onslaught? The outcome was far from certain, but one thing was clear: only one side would emerge victorious. The question was, which side would it be? The battle raged on, the Vikings and English army clashing in a frenzy of steel and shields. Ivar's men fought with all their might, but the English army seemed endless. Just when it seemed that the Vikings were gaining the upper hand, a new wave of English soldiers appeared on the horizon. The Vikings' shield wall was starting to waver, and Ivar knew that they couldn't hold out for much longer. But Ivar was not one to give up easily. He rallied his men, shouting encouragement as they fought to break through the English lines. The Vikings surged forward, their swords rising and falling in deadly arcs. The English army was pushed back, but they refused to yield. The battle was intense, with both sides suffering heavy losses. As the fight raged on, Ivar found himself face to face with the English commander. The two warriors clashed, their swords ringing out as they fought for dominance. Ivar's sword sliced through the English commander's shield, and he fell to the ground, defeated. The English army wavered, their morale broken. The Vikings sensed victory within their grasp and pressed their advantage. The English lines broke, and the Vikings poured through the gap, their swords rising and falling as they cut down any who stood in their way. The battle was won, but at what cost? Ivar's men had paid a heavy price, and many had fallen in the fight. As the Vikings regrouped, they surveyed the aftermath of the battle. The English army lay defeated, their commander dead. Ivar's men had emerged victorious, but they knew that their victory would come at a great cost. The question on everyone's mind was, what would happen next? Would the Vikings be able to claim their prize and return home, or would they be pursued by the English army's remaining forces? Ivar's men began to plunder the English dead, claiming their armor and weapons as their own. But as they searched the bodies, they realized that the English king was not among the dead. Where is the English king? Ivar demanded, his voice cold and menacing. One of the English prisoners trembled as he spoke. He fled during the battle, but you will never catch him. He has the support of the church, and they will stop at nothing to defeat you. Ivar's eyes narrowed. He knew that the church was a powerful force, and that they would not take kindly to the Vikings' raid. He also knew that he had to act quickly before the church could rally the English army and launch a counterattack. The fate of the Vikings hung in the balance. Would they be able to escape with their prize, or would they be caught and defeated by the English army? Ivar's men knew that they had to move fast. They gathered their spoils and began to make their way back to their ships. As they sailed away from the English coast, they knew that they would never forget the battle they had fought. But the question still remained: what would happen next? Would the Vikings be able to return home and enjoy their spoils, or would they be pursued by the English army and the church? The fate of the Vikings was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they would always stand together, united in their quest for glory and treasure. Now it's your turn to join the conversation. What do you think will happen next to Ivar and his men? Will they be able to return home and enjoy their spoils? Or will they be pursued by the English army and the church? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to see more epic battles and Viking adventures, be sure to like and subscribe for more content. New videos are released every week, and we'd love for you to be part of our community. So, what do you think? Will Ivar and his men be able to escape with their prize, Or will they be caught and defeated by the English?